Can I just ask to start, who's heard of Healthy Heads in Trucks and Sheds? Okay, that's good. There's some of you. We're a pretty new organisation, so it's a not-for-profit foundation that was launched in August last year. And it was largely led by Woolworths, in partnership with Coles, Linfox Toll, Australia Post, Cube and Ron Finnemore Transport. And Healthy Heads was established, I guess, in response to the state of mental health amongst largely truck drivers as well as distribution centre workers, so trucks and sheds, people that work in those places. And basically, every year there's a survey done which allows industries to be given a thriving workplace score, and trucking and logistics is rated 19 out of 19 industries for mental health. So it's basically sitting at the bottom as a sector. And I mean, when you think about some of the risk factors that are quite unique, particularly to truck drivers, like disconnect and isolation because they're out on the road, fatigue, being able to control sort of diet and exercise and all of those things. So really this was all of these big organisations getting together to fund a dedicated not-for-profit to try to improve mental health and physical wellbeing across the industry, and doing it for all of industry. So it was very much founded by the big players because they have the resources to do this. But we're launching at Brisbane Truck Show on Friday with our chairman as well as the CEO of the National Heavy Vehicle Regulator, our membership offering to industry. So this is for small to medium businesses, large businesses, but for individuals, so owner drivers, it will be free to join and get access to the resources that we've developed. Is that a good 101?
That's very good. No, thank you very much. And I guess sort of building on that a little bit, we spoke earlier today actually about sort of the lead up of getting Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds started, and I guess it was sort of a pre-pandemic conversation. But do you think anything has changed, in terms of the last year's experience and how organisations are responding?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Felix and I were talking earlier and sort of saying COVID has been two-pronged in terms of shining a light on, I guess, the importance of road transport, and that truck drivers are the ones that kept the economy moving, but also adding additional stress and, I guess, mental toll to them that are already not doing that well as a sector. So I think it was timely in that it brought attention to the importance of that critical role, but it's also made things like we've heard about issues at borders and different COVID regulations in different states and some of the issues that caused for drivers. So I think it definitely made their situation even more testing, but it assisted, I guess, in terms of bringing widespread attention to the importance of that role and what we're trying to do as an industry to improve the workplace.
Thanks. Jerome, did you want to make a comment about that?
I think it's been very interesting with COVID. It's almost been like there's been a compounding. I remember I was talking to someone in one organisation, they made a comment and they said, I'm tired of this bloody word, unprecedented. And when you think about it, across the East Coast and the West Coast as well, there's been these unprecedented environmental issues. There's been fires, there's been floods, there's been droughts endlessly putting it on. And then you have COVID come through it again. And I guess there's one group that got overlooked the whole time through it all was the transport sector, like the supply chains getting through, dealing with all the complexities, and quite often not even viewed as a first responder in some cases. So when some of the fires were going through and burning towns, some of the first things that got through was the trucks to get supplies through. And I remember talking to one of the heads of safety, and he was sort of talking about how proud he was that they're among the first responders. And I remember a friend of mine was dealing with those fires back in Victoria, and he was working for the Building Commission and was just really shell-shocked later on by what he saw. And the question I put to the guys, well, have you spoken to your truck drivers who are the first ones there? Because one of the things a lot of people don't realise is when you go through and you go into those environments, the pressure that goes on them, a simple question to ask them, well, how are you going? How are you coping with it? And it's just that recognition that they may say they're fine. And I think going through this whole COVID thing and talking with some of the companies out there, these issues build up on truck drivers and build up on sectors over time as well. So it shouldn't be just viewed just as COVID. There's always other parts that it's continually putting pressure on this sector.
Yeah, it's a good point. It sort of brings probably the question to mind as well in terms of Healthy Heads and Trucks and Sheds. What is the offering, or what's the portfolio, I guess, or the activity your organisation will get involved in that might not be there already, because there are probably some elements in the market as support systems, I guess, for people in the industry, but what else might there be coming that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, so I think there's, as you've touched on, there are already, when Healthy Heads formed, there was already a lot going on in the industry. So there's Steering Healthy Minds, the VTA program, OzHelp. So there's a lot already happening, and we weren't established to try to duplicate that. I think it's very much to be a sort of national overarching body and support a lot of those programs. So we work quite closely with. We've sort of got partner projects with a number of those that already exist. I think the aim was to be able to share learnings across industry as a whole and have sort of one main body where all of our founding members and then sponsors and partners are sort of pooling money to address the issues for industry. And so what we've done is develop a national health and wellbeing roadmap specifically for this industry. So it had an advisory board that sat over it with representation from the regulator, transport and logistics, as well as the mental health sector. So Beyond Blue and similar organisations sat on the advisory board that developed this 3-year strategy, or what we call a roadmap. And that was actually launched by the Deputy Prime Minister in Wagga on Friday. And then what sits under that are operational guidelines. So what can you actually do in your workplace to start to improve the situation? And then handbooks, so frontline resources for truck drivers and people that work in distribution centres. So I think it's that sort of overarching strategy, and there'll be an evaluation that's built into it going forward to be able to measure how effective it is. But I think it's very much that sort of taking a holistic approach across the country to the sort of efforts that are being injected into trying to improve mental health and wellbeing.
No, thanks. That's good. It's a good sneak peek, and I guess there's more than to come on Friday at the truck show. So for those interested in learning more about it. Just sort of looking to James, do we have Ross online? Yep. Oh, fantastic. So I might just ask a question to Ross, who has conducted a health study with Monash, and just sort of getting your view, Ross, on where you sort of saw the most unexpected takeaways or some of the key learnings from that study, and maybe if you can help sort of draw a bit of a picture on what the study was about as well, that would be great.
Great, thanks Felix, and thanks for having me there today. I wish I was there in person, but it turns out I've got a cold anyway, so if I'd gotten there, I would have been banned from the venue anyway. So an outline of what we did with the driving health project. We managed to survey nearly 1,400 drivers about their health, and the aim of the research is to really be able to provide a snapshot of the health of particularly drivers in the transport industry. Because of all those initiatives that Naomi is talking about, if we don't have a baseline of where the health is sitting, we're never going to be sure if we're actually making a difference or not. And where are we actually making the best inroads to helping drivers to be healthy and stay healthy at work? So obviously the drivers told us a lot of things, and we mentioned one of them at the start, and 20% of the drivers who completed our survey said they'd actually been diagnosed with a mental health condition. And I'd imagine that the actual true number of people who are living with true number of drivers with a mental health condition is probably much higher than that 20%. But in terms of the things that really surprised me in the research was that nearly 30% of the drivers who answered our survey were dealing with 3 or more health conditions at the one time. And that is nearly 4 times the average of the Australian public. So, and what we found with the research is that actually has a significant impact on driving performance. And in fact, of all the things we measured, actually having multiple was the thing that actually impacted the most health, but also driving outcomes as well. And so that really said to me that it has to be a priority that we help drivers to be healthy and stay healthy at work. And the other thing that really stuck out to me too, Felix, was, and there are a number of things, so I can give you more if you like, but the other thing that stuck out to me was that when drivers, if they're away from home for a long time, the home unit functions really well without them. They get used to the driver not being home. And so when the driver who's been away for a long time is really keen to get home, really looking forward to it, gets home, feels a little bit out of place at home. They're getting in the way. The way the family functions is a bit awkward around them, so they actually don't even feel comfortable at home. So you have that situation where they might not, things at work, there might be a lot of pressure, a lot of things they need to deal with. They really look forward to going home and actually being able to relax properly. But unfortunately, that's not an option just because of the way the family unit's functioning, because they're not normally there. That were some of the things that really stuck out to me in the research. But I think the number one thing that we've shown is that health absolutely has to be a priority for people in the transport industry and in particular drivers.
No, thank you very much, Ross. And I guess one sort of question that comes to mind, sort of listening to what you are saying, and I guess the insights, gained is around, where to from here. I mean, what are the next sort of steps from your study, and where would you take it, or where you're taking it, and is there anything that's going to be drawn out of that, I guess, in a practical sense, that can be used to help improve situations?
Absolutely. As Naomi mentioned, there's a lot going on in the industry, particularly around mental health. And so one of the things that we're aiming to do with the Driving Health project, we've got almost 12 months to run, is to actually provide almost like a framework for how you might be able to intervene to improve drivers' health. But one of the things that we're focusing on is that it can't just be about increasing the capacity of the driver to cope with all of the stresses and pressures of the job. There needs to be something that happens at other levels that actually reduces the pressure coming down onto the driver. And so we're actually looking at different ways we can actually support different levels in the transport industry to support drivers in what it is that they need to do, and draw attention to the fact that there are a number of factors that influence the driver's health, and some of those factors might be under different people's control. And if those people are aware of how their responsibilities might impact the health of the driver, they might actually be able to do things differently and provide an easier platform to help drivers to be healthy and stay healthy.
Thank you very much, Ross. Any other thoughts on the study? I mean, I think you would have seen the study as well, and obviously with your sort of areas you're involved in, is there anything that sort of springs to mind where you make connections of previous works or potential future opportunities you are thinking about?
I will. What's really exciting about this bit of work, as NRSP sort of kicked off in 2014, and there's one PhD student. I remember I went along to a road safety conference. Her name was Taryn Chalmers, and she was a PhD student. And her research, the whole reason she did it is because her father was a truck driver, and he was always sad and suffering depression, these sort of things, and he would never talk. And so and there's nothing that'll drive a PhD student in something personal and why you want to get in and do it. And so she was presented at a conference, and that probably led to us creating thought leadership pieces and drawing those out and giving them a platform to talk to their research and articulate it. And I just grabbed a couple of stats from it. And so back then in 2016, when she was presenting, she had an estimate that depression in truck drivers was anywhere between 15 and up to 70%. So it's great to hear now that you're getting the firmness around understanding the data, so then you can see where things are sort of going. But the really powerful thing when she's going in is the average overall in the country is about 1 in 10 people suffer depression. But it's also shouldn't be around a blame sort of system as well. And she drew all these sort of components together. It's not trying to blame the driver or it's not their fault, because it's a neurological, and there's so many things you can do to help build them and to fix it and to work it around. And she sort of listed 3 sort of things around lifestyle change and working on that, psychological, seeing someone talking about it, and then the medical and working it all together. So it's great to hear she sort of labelled this in 2016 and spoke about it in her research, and now you're actually seeing it all coming into place finally in a sector that desperately needs it.
Thanks, Jerome. That's good. Excellent. Maybe while you are speaking, a question to yourself, Jerome. With the National Road Partnership Program, which was launched, I think, in 2014, if I'm right, and with the broad focus it also has on safety, on road safety, what role has health and well-being played in the various programs and studies? And I'm mindful there's a lot of information that the NRSPP has or holds and has been working through over the past years.
I think it's been a component that's sort of grown. We're guided by our industry partners. So we have a steering committee and they led it and sort of point us in our direction where we sort of go. I think from the heavy vehicle sector, one of the big advantages is I don't know whether you've noticed, but government's quite siloed. It's the heavy vehicle guys look after heavy vehicles. And if you talk to someone from light, they have no idea what goes on and this sort of stuff. But one of the big advantages that's come through is I think with the program, it's provided the opportunity for different sectors to talk out, to share their narratives, their case studies, their stories, and personalise. And one that really leaps out was our first sort of webinar we did quite a while ago. It was a toll group on in-vehicle camera systems. And then we did one around with Downer talking around road workers. And there was a forum in Sydney with 650 odd policymakers came together. And it provided a platform where they were actually able to get up and they presented footage and they showed the stuff they deal with at coalface. And I think a lot of the policymakers were stunned and they're like, no, that can't be right. But when you've actually got black and white, it's black and white because it's clear footage. Well, it's very coloured, I guess. But they're putting it out there and they can't argue with all of a sudden seeing these interactions with trucks and those sort of issues. So it helped in taking them on the journey. So that sort of led us to creating, I guess, a lot more elements like toolbox talks. We've created a working group around that at the moment to try and create these evidence-based toolbox talks which have videos and other sort of content. So anyone can use them and they can put them out there. And we're looking at creating them from a heavy vehicle driver's point of view. But it's sort of been a journey, and instead of it just focus on the heavy vehicle sector, talking with other sectors and getting each other to understand what they go through. And one other one I'll just sort of touch on quickly is I guess when you go through this journey, some of you may have been aware of the toll group's presentation talking about the research data when they've had quite a large number of vehicular suicides and pedestrian suicides in their vehicles. This wasn't known, and this was a totally greenfield, wasn't touched on at all. I mean, I remember when Sarah Jones, when we had a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister, and she labelled it to him, and he sat back just stunned. He goes, this stat doesn't exist, what are you talking about? I think this is the advantage of breaking them down and bringing groups together and highlighting it. So this is a project we've been working on now for the last sort of 18 months. It's coming through towards the end of it now. And the key thing, I think, in this sector is the language and communications is at the heart of it. At the first point is how do you talk about this safely? And we talk around safe systems in road safety and safe speeds, safe roads, safe drivers, safe infrastructure and all this sort of stuff. And recognising people make mistakes, but when it gets out into the media and communications, it's very much blame. Truck kills or this happens, and it's always allocating. I think one of the positives that come out of this project, I'm hoping, will be sort of how do you talk around suicides in the road system safely, but then how do you talk about road trauma in a safer way as well?
Thank you very much, Jerome. No, that's good. Any other comments from Ross or Naomi? No?
No, I agree with everything Jerome just said. As per my bio, I previously managed a similar not-for-profit in the rail industry that addressed suicide on rail and trauma to train drivers. And I think it's that at the very start, no one was talking about it, but there is a safe way to do it. We both work with Mindframe, the media initiative, which sets the guidelines on how to talk about it. And it's one of those things, if you don't talk about it, you're not bringing attention to it, and then potential funding as well as validating the experience for the driver. But there's safe ways of doing it, and I think it's going to be a similar journey in trucking because it's that work Sarah did with toll that sort of, I think, really was the first time anyone had started looking at the statistics and realising what an issue it is. So yeah, I just think it's a journey and there's a safe way of doing it, but you can't not talk about it at all.
And that's a really good point, just drawing on that, because I know incredibly, once you start looking under something, people begin sharing stories with you and narratives, and I think the moment you begin looking at it from the sector is in prepping a truck driver, because in the rail, it's just everyone accepts it. It's how do you prepare the resilience of a rail worker, knowing this is probably something they're going to face. The likelihood's very low that a truck driver one of your drivers will go through it, but if they do, if you can prepare them and work through them and actually build them at the beginning that this may happen, you're probably in a major path forward in how to actually prep them for dealing with it if it does. Because some of the near misses I've spoken with, these guys, no one's ever raised it with them. And these can happen anywhere in Australia. There was one with a quad train up in the Kimberleys just a little while, like a few months ago. And there's no real rhyme or reason there. And they are small, like I will say that they're not, this is a big country and there's a lot of things, and we can't do it rail and all those sort of preparations. It's going to be quite a different approach. And I think a key thing in this will be actually prepping the drivers and how to do that in a safe way.
Thanks, Jerome. Maybe shifting pace slightly and looking over to James to see we have one more Mentimeter voting, I think. We wanted to run past you. So if you still have your phones in hand, and we can get that screen up one more time. Here we go. What proportion of drivers would you guess are classified as obese? Looks like the little bubble stopped flowing. So it's actually 1 and 2. And this was another sort of piece that came out of the study that Ross conducted. And so I think just sort of reflecting on what was said earlier, and I think I guess well-being from dietary perspective or eating has probably been a topic in businesses for many years. And we'll come to the statistic in a moment, but I think the part sort of that hasn't been picked up probably from my sort of observations over the last 25 years in business has been that sort of whole mental health and well-being piece. And I think in the past year we certainly started to spend much more time on it, and it's much more of a topic that can be discussed now in business as well. And so I think it's definitely has opened the door sort of a bit more, while maybe historically was related to very specific jobs or roles where these sort of things were expected. But it's certainly much broader discussion now, I find. In terms of the statistics, I think there's still obviously way to go. When we think about how do we actually keep people in a healthy body, because that sort of helps with a healthy mind as well. Especially when they're out on the road, because it is challenging. Shift work, being away from home, possibly camping out overnight in the trucks. So it's definitely an ongoing challenge, and I'm not sure if we've really, set ourselves or I guess the industry up for great success there. Where we're talking sometimes about basic things like find an appropriate, spot to park at night. So it's definitely, way to go, and all these things obviously come together at some point. But maybe another question to the panel, and I might sort of give Ross a chance to answer first, given that he's remote. But Ross, what do you think, or what do you see as the biggest opportunities for organizations to focus on to improve health and well-being of people? What's sort of from your sort of insights you've gained? What are sort of the biggest opportunities you think? Just sort of in terms of the audience and I guess what people can take away as well.
I think the biggest opportunity that we've seen in the research, and we've got another report due soon that will demonstrate this, is that there are multiple factors that influence drivers' health. So it's not just about the driver themselves and what they bring. It's actually about the work, how that's structured, how they're treated at work, how the public perceives them, and how they can work within the regulations and the environment that they operate in. So there are actually multiple opportunities to assist drivers to be healthy. It doesn't. It's unlikely that you're going to find one, I guess, silver bullet that's actually going to fix everything, but there are multiple opportunities to have a positive impact. And when we spoke to drivers, and Jerome talking about the stories that drivers tell, so part of our research was to actually, the survey told us what, and that we conducted interviews with drivers and their partners to tell us the why. And what came through really strongly was that drivers felt a strong lack of respect in what they did, particularly from the public. And it was mentioned a little bit earlier too. So I think there's actually perhaps one of the biggest opportunities to improve driver health is to actually address public perception of the role that drivers play in everyday life in terms of getting things that we need in normal circumstances, let alone in those emergency or unprecedented times that Jerome was talking about. And so there's actually a really good opportunity for someone to pick it up and actually go, we need to be telling people about the hard work that drivers do, that they're putting their health on the line every day, but they're still turning up to work. They're working long hours. They're dealing with all sorts of strange behaviours from other motorists, etc., etc. So they're actually working their socks off to give us the things that we need to be able to live the lives that we live. And so that's where I would say that probably the biggest opportunity is to actually address the general public's perception of what a truck driver is and what a truck driver does.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. I think that's a very good point, indeed. Naomi, do you have thoughts on that as well?
Only that I couldn't agree more. So I've been in the industry for 4 months exactly now, and this is what I've been hearing. We have a standards working group that sits under the Healthy Heads board, and they're specifically looking at things like rest areas and the medicals that are done for drivers, and it's something I'm hearing, again, particularly rest areas, and I know it's something that a lot of people have been doing work on, and I think there is a standard for them, but then it's not necessarily enforceable. We have a driver on the group that was telling a story yesterday in the meeting and saying that some of the rest areas, like the shower facilities, he was like, they're so dirty that you'd be dirtier coming out of it than going in, so we don't use them. And he's like, how do you think that makes us feel, like as drivers, like that we can't even be clean? And so I think that's part of the public perception as well. It's to do with what we're, as an industry, providing drivers and then helping to shift the way that they're seen. Like, yeah, I couldn't agree more with everything Ross has just said, and it's the basic sort of things that they deserve, like to be able to have a shower and eat, have healthy choices. Like we're looking at often the only thing is, the big service stations with McDonald's, KFC, like it's healthy food choices, potentially exercise equipment, and just, I think there's some pretty simple things we could do which would drastically improve their lives and the way they view themselves then, and the way the general public does as well.
No, thanks, Naomi. Maybe giving Jerome a chance to think about the biggest opportunities, I guess, in that space, health and well-being.
I think it's a really interesting question. I did a webinar a while back with Carmel Harrington on sleep. And I think one of the points she made is a lot of people, when you think of exercise, you got to get a sweat up, you got to do these certain things, you got to jog, you got to do. I think a lot of stuff in just balancing the life and creating good habits. As I said, eating healthy, but just when you have those breaks or those chance for a driver to go out, actually using it just for a chance to go for a walk, clearing the mind. How easy is it at the moment to jump on Netflix or Stan and I'll just sit in the truck and I'm having my downtime, but I'm just watching the screen. How do you break those habits? But that's part of society anyway. You go wherever you are and everyone sits while the kids are exercising. Everyone sits on their phones anyway. So it's just part of this habit. And how do you sort of create that opportunity for drivers to get out there and do things? But I think it's just those little steps, trying to get them to think around how can I change those habits or use those opportunities to clear the mind and little steps. And I think that's where organisations can really help guide them in those sort of steps as well.
Actually, if I can just add to that, there's University of Queensland. There's a professor there called Nick Gilson who's doing a pilot with Coles where they're doing HIIT training, high intensity interval training. So they've done a pilot with, I think, 60 drivers where 3 times a week at the depot, it's 9 minutes in each session and it's having drastic results. So it's just, as you said, it doesn't have to be enormous, but it's if the training's provided of here's the circuit, this is what you do, and they do it with a trainer for the first few times and then they can do it on their own. But if just 3 times a week for 9 minutes can make really big changes, I think that's the kind of thing we should be looking at.
It's all about habits. Like when I was coaching and rowing and doing things, it's always the philosophy is it's takes 7 or 8 times and you've got to hammer, you've got to push, you've got to try and create that comfortable habit. And it's going to feel horrible and uncomfortable for the first 3-4 sessions. It's going to hurt. But trying to get them through, and as I said, it's just little steps at a time. It's not about climbing Mount Everest or doing that. But then as you build on them, you slide other little bits and pieces in and create a sort of a good routine. That's why I think you think about New Year's resolutions, how many people fail at them because they're bigger than Ben-Hur. But if you make a little resolution, you do that, and then you build on that. I think that's a sounder and easier way.
It's a good point. It brings probably one thing to mind that we do at Viva. There's a initiative called Move for Life, and we introduced it a couple of years back, really, when we had repetitive strain injuries with airport refuelers and in certain sort of operational jobs. And it's basically a set of, I think, 3 little exercises. I'm not going to show you on stage because I'm not very practiced at it, but it's really good. And I think initially, you get into these environments and they'll be possibly quite male-dominated, sort of a group, and it takes a little bit to get into the swing of things. But I think there are certainly things to consider around culture and how can we introduce, some of these things more as routines in what we do. Maybe also on another reflection. So I think we talked a lot about the driver side, but obviously there's also the office side, or people who are office based, and I think there's definitely a worthwhile sort of element to think about how that's how that part sort of gets supported and gets, I guess, the right airtime and can be addressed when it comes to difficult situations in work or possibly home life, and I guess thinking about how these channels can be introduced in a business environment where they might not exist. How can we have platforms to have these exchanges or make these conversations easier? What's the role of leadership in that? What's sort of the culture aspect that can possibly be changed or addressed over time as well. But
I think that's a really interesting point, because I remember on our steering committee we have Telstra, and there was a fellow, Dave Fitzgerald, and he's now at UGL, but when he was at Telstra, he was head of safety and culture, and same thing, and he was really, really brave because he wanted to change things there and to get people to share, and he actually used himself as an example. He put himself out there of having these sort of, and he was brave, and he said someone asked him a question, and he says, "Are you all right?" And it was a bit of a trigger, and he then shared that across the organisation. So you all of a sudden see posters and pictures of him as a leader pointing out, saying it's fine, and I think he resulted in seeing other people working down the chain as they all got comfortable talking about it, because in a male-dominated sector, males aren't very good at talking about things. I'm also from ag, and so 2 sectors which we really suck at in talking about it, and I think that's one of the hard parts. How can you talk to your mates or ask those questions or just check-ins? And through the Suicide and Road Transport project, I've learned, with one of my friends is struggling, I didn't know that, and now we have monthly check-ins even though he's in Perth, and I think that's some of the other sort of roles that we can do.
Thank you very much, and I think we might be sort of on time, if I'm not mistaken. I see Rob is back there, but yeah, we're good. So maybe, I'm not sure if there's maybe 1 or 2 questions anyone had.
So I'm not sure if everyone heard that. So that was around clinicians being available 24/7. We don't as Healthy Heads, but it's something we're definitely looking at. There's an EAP provider called Connect Psychology, and they have moved to being, they've got psychologists available from 6 a.m. till 11 p.m. and they're looking to go to 24 hours. But as far as I know, no one does it yet. But we're very conscious of that, and even with things like medicals, like that you've got to have people that are available in outside of hours. So as far as I'm aware, there's no companies yet that are doing it, but there's definitely ones we're watching. Ron Finnemore Transport's piloting this Connect Psychology to see what they're like, and they'll look to go 24/7 by having clinicians in the UK that can work overnight, I guess, so that someone's always available.
No last questions? All right, please round of applause for Naomi, Jerome, and Ross, if you can put them back on the screen. So thank you very much for joining the panel today and for the insights you provided. Thank you.